Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 152. Nick Percy from Killer Food Plots. Reap what you sow. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Dr. Ken Nordberg. You're listening to my favorite podcast on the internet, Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
I'm Jim Shockey, and you're about to listen to my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
I'm Fred Eichler, and you're listening to my favorite podcast on iTunes, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another great episode of the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Dusty Phillips, and I'm joined with the host, Jay Scott. Jay, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, brother. What's going on?
Man, just enjoying some time on the mic with you and the guest, and another great episode coming at you. And can't thank the fans and the listeners and everybody that we know that tunes in with us week after week, join us on another great episode, Jay.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite times of the week. It's when we get to record and get to listen to the show, as I'm sure other people are doing. And just so you know, we do have an app if you'd like to listen to this show on your Apple device. There is a specific app where you can download it, and if you wanted to get it, you can get it for free, and you can have access to all the shows quickly and easily, and it will remind you that there's a new show that has just been posted, just like the podcast app would, but this one is specific to the Big Buck Registry. You can go to bigbuckregistry.com/app, and you can download that for nothing. For free, and you can also download an app that'll play it for Google devices, which is bigbuckregistry.com/GAPP or GApp. So check that out.
Very cool.
Dusty, you've been doing some haying, as I recall, in your neck of the woods, because the grass is a little taller there than it is here in New Hampshire, and it's that you've been spending many hours working hard doing some haying. Now, one of my curiosities was that it takes time to grow grass, and it's not just growing grass. I mean, you actually cultivate this stuff. So how does that happen? What do you do to make things grow?
At the beginning of the year, you go in and you apply some fertilizer, which is a 30-10-10 mix. You pray for rain and great sunshine, Jay. And once you fertilize, the rain comes here in the spring, and the next thing you know, the sun's poking out and things are looking up. And then once you let it grow, you get about an 18 to 24 inch of growth of the grass. And depends on what kind of grass or alfalfa or whatever you got in your hayfield. Then you just got to wait for it to mature out, but you don't want to get so mature that it becomes a real nasty stemmy. You want to cut it. Like Timothy hay, you would cut when the mature head gets to about 2.5 inches, and that just it shoots a sprout, which gets a head on it. And not that you measure it, but visually you see when it gets 2.5 inches, and you go in and you just mow it down, and you get about 3 days of drying period there, and you ted it out, and you rake it up, and then you bale it on about the third day. So it's it's a little bit of a process, and grass will grow. You plant seed of grass and it'll grow on its own, but fertilizer gives it that little spike to yield a little better and more tonnage per acre. So I recommend some fertilizer. And speaking of getting into hay, Jay, it's that time of year that food plots are a huge focal point for all the whitetail hunters in the woods. And some of the listeners that are new to food plots, I think that we ought to go on an adventure and try to help educate them on how to lay out a food plot and what to do and how, where, what, when, and why.
I could not agree with you more, and that was the setup question as to how to make things grow. So what we've done this week, we've gone out and found Nick Percy, thanks to Jim Keller for setting up this interview, from Killer Food Plots. And Nick knows an awful lot about this kind of stuff. You know a lot about this stuff. And I think in this interview, if I'm not mistaken, I kind of backed off and I let you just do the talking and the questioning for the most part.
Something I've been around for a long time, Jay. I was raised around farming and everything to do with, making sure that you're giving your soil the attention that it needs. Everybody can just throw something and grow stuff. There's no doubt about that. But to actually get in there and pull your own soil samples, lay your lime, lay your fertilization, do your tillage, then apply your seed, then follow up with your chemical to spray with. And, at the end, you want the most ultimate yield that you can produce on the acreage that you're working with. And that's a main focal point for me, is to make sure that you go in and be a stewardess of the soil and pull out the most tonnage and yields that you can out of the soil that you got there.
I got to say, I'm looking forward to this interview. I know we actually were the ones recording and doing that, but this one I'm actually going to play back and listen a few times, because I know we talked about a lot of interesting stuff. And for me, as the non-farmer, as the non-food plotter, for the most part, because it's not typically what I do here to hunt whitetail, but I'm interested in doing some of that. This will be the show that I'm going to turn to educate myself. And I think everybody else that's listening who wants to do this kind of thing, this is a great show to listen to.
Yeah, for sure. Failure is always something that is a red flag to most. That taking a chance, you're taking a little bit of chance with your money, and it's almost like gambling. In reality, you may go out and plant a food plot, and something, Mother Nature, that you can't control happens, and it just completely floods out your food plot, and nothing comes up, and then it's like, wow. I just spent, a couple $100 or $1,000 on seed trying to make a food plot, and then I fail like this. And, it can be a son of a gun sometimes, but you just got to, trial and error, keep going at it. And once you figure it out, and once you get a system down that works for your soil, and, we'll break all that down once we get into this podcast. But, don't be scared that, sometimes it don't always work, even as experienced being in agricultural for as long as I have and being experienced, I still fail too. And it's nothing you can really do about it, but learn from either a mistake, or Mother Nature will educate you to wait a few weeks or whatever you've done wrong. And, just learn from your mistakes with it, and don't be scared to try different things, and definitely contact somebody that can either talk with you about proper seed application or chemicals. That, you just can't get enough education when you first get going to get yourself started, and somebody else's help may just be what you need just to make it happen.
Right. I'm looking forward to this one. So before we get to Nick Percy from Killer Food Plots, let's turn to Jim Keller with the Deer News.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. In our first story this week, moose spotted trotting down suburban Boston streets. This article was reported by WCVB ABC Channel 5 News. A moose was spotted Wednesday, June 1st, trotting down the streets of two densely populated Boston suburbs. Police in Watertown and the neighboring Belmont posted video on their Facebook pages of the adult female moose. The moose stuck to the sidewalk and waterfront but ran right down the middle of the street in Belmont. It was huge, and I couldn't get over the size of the moose, one resident said. We expect to see animals, strays running around, but never a moose in our neighborhood. She was spotted lingering in the Pearl Street neighborhood of Belmont. Belmont Assistant Chief James McIsaac said he has seen plenty of deer in his 17 years on the force, but never a moose. The officers were told to be on the lookout for the moose and make sure there was no traffic or anything that could endanger the moose, he said. A spokeswoman for the State Environmental Police says the moose entered a wooded area of Belmont and the agency is monitoring the situation. There were no reports of moose-related damage in either town. Snapshot, Wisconsin. NASA on board for the largest wildlife trail cam project ever. This article was originally reported by Anthony Thurston on digitaltrends.com and is a follow-up to last week's story. The state of Wisconsin and NASA are joining forces to blanket America's dairyland with over 5,000 outdoor trail cameras with the hopes of documenting the wildlife of the state undisturbed in its natural habitats. Snapshot Wisconsin, as the project has been dubbed, aims to provide one of the richest and most comprehensive caches of wildlife data for any spot on our planet. Some of you may be wondering how NASA plays into all of this. The answer actually makes a lot of sense, as each of the cameras being placed are equipped with GPS, and the data collected will be paired with NASA's vast data bank of satellite imagery and other potentially relevant data. This will allow researchers to monitor animal movements and migration habits in ways that were never previously possible. A common way to track animal movements currently is by expensive plane flights, and this only works on larger animals who travel in groups or are easy to pick up from high altitudes. Another common tool is radio collars, but this requires capturing the animal. Snapshot Wisconsin could soon render such flights or collars obsolete. One of the biggest holes in our observation of animals over the years has been our inability to truly track their movements across a range area to the level that this project will make possible. So far, over 500 motion-sensing cameras have been placed in strategic locations as part of the Snapshot Wisconsin initiative, which actually kicked off May 17th, with more being added by volunteers over the coming months. We will continue to monitor the progress of this project. Montana white-tailed deer numbers are soaring. This article was originally reported by Sam Wilson on dailyinterlake.com. White-tailed deer are doing well in northwest Montana, so much so that state wildlife managers believe the population could double within the next 2 to 3 years. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks' 2016 Wildlife Status Update, released last week, reports that spring surveys of whitetails show a continuation of the general upward trend since their numbers took a hit from several rough winters leading up to 2010. This spring's survey found that high recruitment rates, which is the ratio of adults to the number of fawns that survive the winter, show the population likely will continue to increase. The report, however, confirms the frustration of local mule deer hunters. Survey data for muleys are spotty, due in part to their preferred habitat of dense timber cover, but the report's overall conclusion points to a continuation of declines seen in the past 8 to 10 years. Habitat changes and predation are believed to be behind an overall decline in the region's mule deer during the past decade. Mule deer may also be outcompeted for resources where their habitat overlaps with populations of white-tailed deer. Elk numbers are similarly difficult to obtain but seem to be improving. For the full report, visit fwp.mt.gov. Urban bow hunters claim nearly 400 deer in Polk County, Iowa. This article was written by Timothy Minch of the Des Moines Register. The odds of crashing into a deer in central Iowa would increase without urban bow hunters. That's one of the benefits of a 20-year-old program that allows bow hunting in designated spots within city limits, according to organizers. During the latest season, hunters killed almost 400 deer, most of them does. The program targets females since they're the ones that reproduce, causing overpopulation concerns that can plague urban areas. Since 1996, Polk County's urban bow hunting program has become the biggest, most successful of its kind in the state, according to officials with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. The number of hunters has increased, the area covered has expanded, and the metro's deer population has shrunk. The latest estimate from 2014 showed 12 deer per square mile in Des Moines Waterworks Park, compared with 53 in 1998. Iowa is one of the leading states for deer vehicle collisions. State Farm Insurance calculates that the chances of an Iowa motorist striking a deer over the next 12 months at 1 in 68, behind West Virginia and Montana. Polk County averaged 138 deer auto accidents from 2007 to 2011. This season, hunters claimed 29 bucks and 324 antlerless deer across the Des Moines metro cities. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. If you have any ideas for future topics or have questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller with the Deer News. Without further ado, here's Nick Percy.
Nick Percy, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks, guys. Good to be here.
We're psyched to have you. It's always a pleasure when we can talk food plots, and here you got it going on over there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we've been at it for 26 years. I've been doing food plotting and habitat management.
Okay, that qualifies.
A lot of trials and tribulations. And
I think that's expert status when you've been doing it for 26 years. I think you can do anything for 26 years. You're technically an expert in it. So that's what we would like on the show, are experts in the field. Nick, tell us about yourself a little bit. Where are you from?
Well, I'm from West Michigan. So over on the Lake Michigan shoreline is where I pretty much grew up. Spent a lot of time in the Michigan woods, hunting and fishing and doing all that kind of good stuff. I've mentioned I've been doing food plotting and habitat management for about 26 years now, and have a green thumb, and was asked to plant some food plots for my guys, my buddies that I hung out with and hunted with, and kind of how it all started. And over the course of that time, I've had a high fence ranch where I raised whitetail for over 10 years, and that was quite an adventure and a learning experience for sure. And through all of that, became ground up property, which has evolved into Killer Food Plots in the last 6 years, or the last 7 years now. I rebranded to Killer Food Plots. So
cool. I've heard good things about Killer Food Plots. Why'd you change the name?
Ground up property was more of my services side of our business.
Okay.
So where we go out and actually do the habitat management, we do full timber management, develop the understory, natural food, natural cover. We build buck bedding, doe bedding, but we wanted to have something that was more memorable, and Killer Food Plots is definitely a name that sticks in people's mind over maybe ground up property. And we really wanted to have more of a presence in the national end of the hunting industry and be able to get out there and help people. That's really our goal, and anybody that knows myself or our staff or our team is we're all about helping people learn and answer their questions, and hopefully we're going to do some of that on the show today. Nice.
Well, the name Killer Food Plots is killer, just so you know. Just great name.
Thanks,
Sticks
man.
out, very powerful. It speaks loudly about what you guys are doing. So very good job.
Appreciate it. I am an 80s boy.
So am I.
So it was killer.
Yeah. Very nice. Let's transition right into some food plot stuff, and I'm gonna kind of take this is not my usual role, but I'm going to take a little step back and let Dusty kind of lead the charge because he's full of information about farming. I'm sure he's going to have some great questions for you, and I'm going to kind of listen and chime in as we go. But Nick, let's talk about some of the basics of food plots before we get into a more advanced setting with Dusty about if I'm just brand new, if I'm a brand new hunter and I am brand new to food plots, how important is a food plot in my overall plan if I'm just brand new?
Well, a food plot has great importance in keeping a deer or giving a deer a reason to come to your property when maybe you don't have any other infrastructure. Maybe you don't have the right bedding, you don't have the right attraction through hard mast or other soft mast forms. A food plot can be a great source of nutrition and attraction to draw that deer in early season, middle of the season, or late season if you're a muzzleloader hunter, for instance.
Gotcha. All right. So if I'm doing a brand new food plot, if I'm a brand new hunter and I'm going to incorporate this because I know it's the thing to do to draw a deer to my spot, what types of things, what basic things can I do? Just a rudimentary, no complicated type things. What's the first thing I got to do?
Well, a soil test is one of the most important things you can do. It's the least expensive part of the process, and it will really help the brand new food plot person understand or establish a baseline of what's going on in their soil.
Okay.
They don't have to be an expert at reading it. They just need to go down 3-4 inches, get below the root level of the vegetation that's currently there, take a shovel, break that hard pan open, take a little garden hand shovel size and take some scoops below the vegetation, try to keep the rocks and sticks and debris out of it. Take that, put it into a 5-gallon bucket, and do that at 8, 10, 12 spots throughout their plot, depending on how large the plot area that they're looking to plant. Mix that up real good. Put that into one of our Killer Food Plot sample bags, or maybe their local extension can do it for them. And then fill out the form, submit it, and then they'll generate a test result. And regardless of where you get it done, they are usually pretty good about walking you through where the deficiencies are, what you need to do to correct that, and how much of each of those products, and then they can direct you to the location you need to go to get those amendments.
When you say soil samples and you submit them, Nick, how do we get a hold of a soil sample bag and that sort of thing?
Well, if you get a hold of me at Killer Food Plots, they should be on our website here soon, but in the meantime, they're able to get a hold of me either on Facebook, Killer Food Plots. They can call me. 616-550-8483 is my actual contact number, so they can call me to order one, or they can email me at killerfoodplots.com, and we can get an order processed through and mail one out to them.
Gotcha. So there's directions how to get that back to you and everything once you get your soil sample bag.
Exactly. Yep. Right on the form, it'll talk about it. If they do have any questions at all, again, they can reach out to us. We can walk them through it step by step. It's such a vital part of starting the food plotting process that every food plot seminar we do, anybody we talk to at the hunting expo circuit, that's what we always start with is a food plot soil sample. Because if you
Gotcha.
don't correct the soil and don't fix that soil, it's you're throwing a lot of good money with fertilizer and seed potentially out the windows.
Gotcha. Now, let's say that your farms, not once you get your sample back and you have somebody that's an expert level of reading your numbers for your soil sample, is it proper to spend all the money the first year to get that exactly right, or is this something that we can kind of build up over a couple years as far as cost-wise for fertilization?
Well, I guess there's a couple different ways to look at that. So when you're dealing with a piece of ground, one of the biggest problems that people run into is they have low pH or they have high acidic level, and that's just because generally there's not a lot of area that has high quality, highly organic soil available in the spot where we're just going to randomly put a food plot in. So what that means is the amendment of that piece of ground or that dirt is going to require lime. And there's different types of lime. There's pelletized lime, which is just what it said. It's a crystallized or a little pellet, looks like a BB, that when you apply pellet lime, it starts taking effect in about 2 weeks, but it doesn't stick around very long in the soil. So it's a 2 weeks it starts sweetening the ground, and once there's moisture added and it starts breaking down, it can start to amend your pH and release the nutrients that are available in the soil and make them available to the plant. Whereas agricultural lime starts working after about 2 months, which is an overlap. Pellet lime only works for about 2.5, 3 months to release and sweeten that ground before it starts fading away. Agricultural lime starts working at about 2 months, really effectively doing something in the soil, but it can last a couple years. Regardless of what variety of lime you have, one particle of lime must touch one particle of soil in order to neutralize or to release the nutrients that are within that soil and make them available to the plants.
So this is a pretty good coverage is what you're talking.
Yeah, pretty good coverage. The pounds per acre that you need to apply, if you're off 6.5 to 7.5 is ideal for growing. Now, I will say that Killer Food Plots Deepwood and the Killer Food Plots Climatize are both very versatile planting seed varieties, and they will grow from about 5.8 on up to about 8 very, very well. But the reality is perfectly neutral soil is 7.0. And when you have perfectly neutral soil at 7.0, the fertilizer and other nutrients that you either add to or are available in the soil are 100% available to the plant when the soil is neutral. If it's 6.5, you lose about 30% of that availability. And as you drop down, it becomes less and less available to the new plant and the roots of the new plant. So your success dramatically drops.
Gotcha. So maybe taking a step back here, and I should have asked this a minute ago. I say we're going out to a piece of property and we've picked out an area. It's all growed up. It's high weeds and it's just a terrible start. Any suggestions on how to burn down and remove all the grass and unwanted weeds that in that area?
Well, the way that we usually approach those situations is you can use a non-selective herbicide like a Roundup, to use the national brand, but there are other generics of that. What we do is we use a product within our water as a surfactant called Hellfire, and we mix that into our water. Now there's crop oil and there's some other different surfactants you can buy. We add that Hellfire to our water at 8 ounces per 25 gallons or a quart per 100 gallons of water. We mix that around, and then we add our Roundup at 3 ounces per gallon of water. Usually 25 gallons, a 25-gallon spray tank, for instance, would have 8 ounces of Hellfire surfactant mixed in, and it would have 75 ounces of Roundup, and we would spray that on 1 acre to kill the grass, the broadleaf, and any other type of vegetation that's in the plot. At that point, go ahead.
Should you pull a soil sample before or after you burn down?
I pull a sample before.
Okay.
Because then I can get it into the lab. We usually turn the soil sample around in anywhere from 3 to 7 days, depending on how busy our lab is. And in that meantime, you can go ahead and get that sprayed. The same day you pull the soil sample, you can get it sprayed and let that start working to kill off the vegetation. Now, what we find is with the Hellfire, mixed with the Roundup, within 5 to 6 days, it's burned all the way down, all the way to the root on the grass. That's what that Hellfire does. It helps to kill that grass dead all the way to the root ball. So.
Gotcha. Okay. So we've got the grass burn off. We've got the soil sample pulled. Sample comes back. Now it's time to start working on the pH level. And that's where you ran into talking about the lime. So let's say we've got our pH level figured out. We've laid down the proper poundage to the acre on the level, on the lime. Where do we go from there?
Well, so your pH level, you need to amend that. And depending on what your soil sample's telling you, will determine the pounds per acre that you need to be putting in. So if you're using pellet lime, you're able to put that out with a broadcast spreader. So it's like something you push around in your yard it wings it out there like you're putting fertilizer on your front lawn, or whether it's something that's being pulled behind a quad or attached to a 3-point on a tractor, or you're using a great big ag lime spreader that you're pulling behind a larger tractor. And, it kind of depends on what you have access to, how large your food plots are, and ultimately how much amendment you need to do to your pH. It can be as simple as, like I said, a push or even over-the-shoulder spreader, which just is a lot more work to do it that way, but it can certainly be done. And that's where we started 26 years ago, and graduated up from there.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Once we get lime and fertilizer down, what's our next step?
The next step is to rototill it or turn it into the ground and work it into the ground some way, shape, or form. You need to, like I said earlier, lime works on a particle of lime must touch a particle of the soil, of the dirt, in order to neutralize it. So it's really important that you get that all worked into the ground. Now, you don't have to get crazy, but you want to work it into the, 4 to 8 inches deep into your soil, get it worked in. Your fertilizer really should stay up in the top 3 to 4 inches of your soil, where your new plant roots are going to be seeking it out. A lot of the time, the soil is lacking organic matter. So one of the things we really focus on with our Growganics fusion and our Growganics hydration, which is a natural-based, waterway-safe fertilizer made to build the soil with heavy organic matter in it, is we apply that and we get that worked into that top portion of that soil. That starts to hold more moisture and retain the nutrients that are otherwise going to be leached out of the soil by when it rains real hard in the fall, or in the summertime. One heavy rain can eliminate roughly 30% of your fertilizer and nutrients that are in your soil when you have a sandy or a sandy loamy type soil. So it's important to start building that organic matter up.
Gotcha. So we've fertilized, or we've limed, or we burnt down, we limed, we fertilized. Now we've tilled it under. What's our next step?
So then the next step is to take either a harrow drag, or what essentially is a harrow drag has some fingers that stick down. It's like a chain mat, or like a chain link fence. If you were to take a piece of chain link fence and drag it around, and think about that with spikes on it. For those that don't know what a harrow drag is, we want to drag out the plot. We want to get rid of all the sticks and rocks and large debris. We want to smooth it out, get it as level as we can. And then, depending on what type of seed variety we're intending to plant in that plot, if we're going to use, say, for instance, the Killer Food Plots Border Patrol, which is our screening product, it gets between 8 and 12 foot tall. It also has 40% food in it for the spring summer, feeding our youngest deer to our oldest deer. At that point, you would broadcast out the Border Patrol and make your design or your shape around the perimeter and your somewhat partial walls on the inside. And then our spring-summer Climatize, which is also a larger seed, we would go ahead and broadcast that on the inside of where the Border Patrol is around the perimeter, and we would broadcast that. Then we would take that chain link fence or that harrow drag and do a single pass over the top of that seed. Now, we only do that with large seed, okay? This is seed that's, most people know what a soybean looks like as far as the actual bean itself, or like a green pea, something in the neighborhood of that. We have buckwheat and climbing vining winter peas, soybeans, sugar beet seeds in our Climatize. And then in our Border Patrol, we have some larger seeds that create the KFP structure and the foundation. So those are larger seeds. Those are the only type of seeds that you want to drag into the plot one time. Then we either use a yard roller, something you use to knock down your mole hills. You can use that, or if you actually have access to a cultipacker, that's ideal, and you want to cultipack that soil. 2 reasons you want to do it that way. Larger seeds are more susceptible to being picked off and eaten by birds and turkeys, so you want to get them under the soil a little bit. Plus, they like that seed-to-soil contact, and they can stand to be put under the ground a little bit, under the soil. But important factor is when you open your soil up, because in most cases we're lacking moisture availability for our new food plots. And so it's really critical that to open the ground, either tilling, disking, some way turning the soil over, because it puts oxygen into the soil. And then when you cultipack or roll the soil down, you're trapping the moisture in the soil, but you're also trapping that oxygen down in the soil. So as the new plant roots are searching for nutrients, they're also looking for oxygen in the soil in order to survive. When you're dealing with a particular soil type that's dense or compacted like clay, or more of a wet, mucky type soil, those soils lack oxygen availability for the new plants. And so a lot of those plots that maybe folks have tried to plant before and had limited success, or maybe it came up and then died, a lot of that has to do with not having enough oxygen in the soil. So when you break that soil up, open it up, trap oxygen in there, you're going to improve your success. And that's where our Groganics fertilizer, with all the organic matter, creates those additional oxygen pockets with crucial micro and macronutrients, organics, carbon, calcium, live biology, and minerals to build that soil and have what's available and needed for those new plants to thrive and to survive and to get some serious growth out of them for your whitetail.
Gotcha. When you talk about the larger seeds and you're saying that you just put them out on the ground, and that's where we get into what's somewhat called a throw and grow. Break that down a little bit about when somebody says throw and grow, what's that mean?
So a throw and grow type seed is the majority of those type of products are made up of a ryegrass. Okay, so much like the grass or seed you're going to plant in your yard. Ryegrass is a seed variety that's very aggressive, and it doesn't need ideal conditions to be successful. But the reality is it's not very nutritious to the deer. So when somebody wants to go out and put a throw and grow out, and they just want to throw it out there, what I tell people is that killer food plots, our tagline is you reap what you sow. So if you put very little effort into a food plot, you can expect to get very little output out of a food plot. A throw and grow type mix is just that. You throw it out there, you might rake it up and break up the topsoil a little bit and put it out there. What we like to do, and I know there's a lot of folks out there that struggle to have time, or they don't have the finances, or they just don't have the knowledge or they don't feel like they have the knowledge to be successful in food plotting, so they just want something that's quick and easy, and they can go throw it out there and get back to hanging out with the family around the campfire. What we came up with is our killer food plot Deep Woods, and the Deep Woods is our answer to throw and grow. Instead of using the annual ryegrass, we have a high-quality rye in there. It's a cereal grain rye. This is very important in benefiting the ruminant health and digestive system in a whitetail.
Is this going to be
in combination with our
annual, Nick?
This is an annual. Yep, throw and grows are our annual type food plots.
Okay.
And so instead of putting all this ryegrass, which is very aggressive and it sticks around and it doesn't really have a lot of nutritional value or attractiveness to a whitetail, especially once it gets over a few inches tall. Deer don't generally eat grass in your yard any more than they're going to eat that throw and grow after it gets grown up a little bit. So what we've done is we've come at it with more of a high-end grain that is beneficial to a whitetail and their nutritional needs at critical times of the year. That is in the annual rye and the winter wheat. We then throw some high-energy food source in there with our KFP radishes, which is also a soil, opens up the soil and creates oxygen pockets, high in sugar content, which is critical for deer and later in the season and through to the winter and gets them into the spring, as well as our rape, which our rape is a lettuce variety. In fact, all of our brassicas are lettuce variety plants, which means they're more palatable and thin, like a romaine lettuce leaf, as opposed to a big rubbery cabbage leaf. Right. But they provide vital energy, sugars that the deer need for daily energy. The cereal grains are effectively duplicating the natural browse that are available on the plants and the bushes. green, spring green up to fall when things die off and go away for the year, or they go back dormant. The cereal grains are important for a whitetail and their digestive system. So it's critical to add those. Again, higher quality than rye, just a regular rye grass. And then we have a crimson clover in that deep woods blend that adds a protein kicker. And that is a blend that you can plant early spring, or you can plant it in the fall. It'll last you all the way through the winter to the next spring. And it provides a much higher level of daily grains, high energy carbs, and a protein source that whitetails actually need, and they will come to it and consume it on a consistent basis and have that draw that we were talking about earlier, have that draw to your crop that is so critical.
Gotcha. So it sounds like if you're going to do a throw and grow, you need to really pay attention to not just be spreading grass seed.
Exactly. Yep. I tell people if that's all you want to do, then go to the mill and buy rye grass and throw it out there. It's a lot cheaper, and you know, the reality is the deer in an area where there's absolutely no quality food, they might eat on it when it's real young, maybe an inch or 2 inches tall, but after that it loses any kind of real value to them. Whitetails are very ineffective at breaking down the food that they eat in their ruminant system. I always say what goes in one end of a whitetail, a lot of it goes back out the backside of them. They don't metabolize very well what they eat, so it's really crucial in the seed types or the plant types that we put into our seed blends. And this is where that 11 years of raising whitetails has really come in handy, is to understand what they need. Mother Nature is the most important thing you can do, is to improve your woods, the natural food that's on your particular piece of property. And then what we do is we try to supplement or fill in the gaps in Mother Nature by building upon the proteins and building upon those carbohydrates and those cereal grains at critical times of the year when they're not as readily available to the whitetail.
Right, and that makes sense.
Yep, and that will continue to and have them come to your property over the neighboring property. And that food source we talked about early on that's so critical, you know, to continue to attract them to your property when, you know, all the hard mass is gone and there's no acorns, there's no beech nuts, all that stuff is not available. If you have a late season food plot, it can sure be quite exciting and start drawing in some mature animals come muzzleloader season, because they go back to feeding patterns, they go back to food, and their guard comes down and they're looking to rebuild themselves post-rut and build their body back up and try to get themselves to a place where they can sustain, at least up here in the north, they can sustain the hard winters that we have that follow our rut. So,
right, this all makes sense. All right, breaking down a little bit more to, let's say I'm a hunter, I've got a four-wheeler, I've went to Tractor Supply and bought a small little ATV disc. That pretty much can allow me to seed any particular food plot that I need to do, as long as I can get that sprayed, worked up a little bit, and broadcast and packed back in. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. That's, you know, we started 26 years ago. It's exactly how we did it. You know, we had a buddy who had a quad, and we had a farmer who was willing to give us his rusty old disc that was laying on the edge of the field that wasn't in very good shape, and we cut it up and we welded it back together and we made it work. What I see today at Tractor Supply or Rural Kings and, you know, Big Art, they have some amazing pieces of equipment out there in the industry now that hook up to the back of your quad on a hitch. You can change the angle of the disc. You can add weight, you know, add some weight onto the back of them, and you're able to break down. One of the coolest ones I actually saw here a couple of years ago actually has positive down pressure, where you crank the thing right down and it doesn't hop around while you're driving. It actually bites down into the ground and breaks it up. And they've come a long way in some of those low-cost implements that are available nowadays.
Gotcha. Yeah, this makes sense. You know, and some people say, well, I don't have a call packer. Well, use your ATV to drive back over after you've broadcast your seed. Smash that seed in and give that root base.
Absolutely.
Let's run through all your products, and I'll go one by one, and you kind of break it down of what it is and the best times of year to plant. We'll start out with the Border Patrol.
Well, the Border Patrol was the answer to how do we get more daytime movement out of our whitetail deer. And So I started using that 16 years ago for my guys in the industry. And the Border Patrol is made up of 3 different products that create a tall wall of vegetation. And then we add in our KFP climbing vining winter peas, which climb and trellis up this tall vegetation, 6-7 foot tall. They're fully edible from the end all the way back down to the ground, the leaves and the roots. They're a non-pod producing variety. So they're actually made to produce a lot of leafy greens that are available very thin and palatable, which is critical for your youngest deer and your oldest deer, where they have the most difficulty in breaking down what they're eating. In addition to that, it has a foraged soybean, which again is a non-pod producer, but it produces big, green, very thin leaves. Right. Both those foraged soybeans and that climbing vining KFP winter pea are about in the mid-20s on the protein level. So again, Mother Nature on any given piece of woods is producing 10 to 12% protein. So you're talking double that, which is critical in the early spring, summer, especially does that have given birth to their fawns and they're trying to stay ahead of the game and being depleted daily, trying to continue to produce and have that milk available for their new fawns. But it's also important to your bucks that are trying to recover. And once your fawns are weaned from mom and they have to go start to eat native vegetation, they're not immediately able to digest what their mom is taking them to eat. Those does are taking those fawns to different food sources, and Mother Nature doesn't always cooperate. We know how cruel she can be sometimes in not providing the vital nutrients that they need. So by supplementing with something like the KFP, climbing vining winter pea, and the foraged soybean, it's very critical. That is the same pea and bean that is in our climatized mix that I mentioned earlier. So the Border Patrol is a screening with 40% food and 60% screening at 8 to 10 foot wide strips. Even when it turns brown later in the season, you cannot see through it. It creates a secure ceiling for your whitetail, so they will move during daylight hours from their natural cover or bedding area in and out of the food plot, creating a much better opportunity for observation and to be able to harvest the mature doe or buck that you're trying to harvest from your property while continuing to feed them. So
that's perfect.
Yeah, it's a pretty dynamic product. It's like nobody else is in the industry. There's a lot of different screening products out there now. In the last, I'd say in the last 4 years, I've seen quite an influx of screening products, but none of them contain the level of food or the quality. There is no food in most of those mixes. They're just straight screen. And the problem is what I saw in migrating this product over the last 16 years is let's face it, most guys and gals' food plots are an acre or smaller. And if you start taking 10-foot wide strip around the outside of it, it doesn't leave much room for food. So we really thought it was vital to be able to get that food piece into the mix, especially at that critical time of the year, which is the spring, summertime.
Gotcha. What's our next product that you have?
The Climatize. The Climatize has the same peas and beans that are in the Border Patrol, again, because they're such a vital importance at that spring, summer time or in early fall. They're very, very edible and desirable. It also has buckwheat, which the buckwheat has protein and other benefits to a whitetail, but it also allows the climbing vining winter pea to climb it and trellis up that. And then it has 2 times the sugar beets in it now. We doubled the sugar beets in it a couple years ago, and it's a slam dunk as far as a spring summer attraction. It'll attract your biggest bucks and your mature does on a consistent basis. It'll draw them out of those places they like to hide and provide a lot of high mid-20s on up new protein levels. Later in the season, what we do with a lot of our climatized plots that are in a lighter soils, that are in loam or in a sandy loam type condition or more of a gravel, is we're able to come right over the top of those in the fall with either our Carnage brassicas or our Deep Woods blend that I mentioned earlier. Those 2 particular varieties are fairly small seeds, and for the guy or gal that doesn't have a lot of time or maybe they have to borrow pieces of equipment to put their initial food plot in, what's cool is that they can come right over the top of that, meaning broadcast it with a bag seeder over their shoulder right into that existing climatized plot, then go ahead and add some Groganics or some triple 19 fertilizer, and then either mow it with a bush hog or a weed whack it down if it's a smaller plot to the tops of the sugar beets, the big green leaves that are be on your sugar beet, and then all that thatch from the dead vegetation off the branches from the soybeans and the buckwheat that's been spent or consumed, that acts as a thatch and it drops down on the inside, and then you can go back to watching the football game and you don't have to spend a lot of time tilling your ground again, which is kind of cool. For those that don't have that luxury, then in the fall we come back and address the soil again by mowing that down, turning that back in if there's weeds and grass that have infiltrated our food plot. And I think that's something we should probably talk about here in a minute. But we may have to spray it again with a non-selective herbicide Roundup, get it killed off again, get it turned back into the ground, and then plant our carnage or our deep woods. Now, we addressed earlier turning the ground and preparing, and we talked about harrow dragging or using a fence for the large seeds. When you're dealing with clovers, chicories, brassicas, which are your turnips, your rape, your radishes, when you're dealing with some of those smaller seeds in some of your small oats or your small grains, I should say, like your rye or your winter wheat, your clovers, those varieties of seeds are a small seed. The way that we plant each one of those is a little different than the big seed. So after we did all of our steps, we did our soil test, we burned it down, we added our soil amendment, we disked it up, we harrow dragged it. At this point, instead of seeding it like we did the large seed, what we want to do is we want to run our cultipacker or our yard roller over the top of that food plot and pack it down. Then we want to put our seed into our seeder, and we want to go ahead and broadcast our seed at the rate in which it's supposed to be applied. And then we want to re-roll it or re-cultipack the seed, simply indenting that small seed into the top of the soil, into the top surface of the soil, getting good seed-soil contact, but not burying the seed. Because what ends up happening is if you bury it too deep, it lays there dormant, unable to germinate and to reach the soil, the surface of the soil and burst through, and you have a failed food plot, or at least a delayed food plot until the rain or until you dip it up again, something pounds it closer to the surface. And that's one of the biggest mistakes people make, is that they get everything done, they harrow drag, they seed it, and they drag that small seed again, and they get it too deep, and then their food plot success, it doesn't look like a thick, lush food plot. It's very splotchy. And the results, could have been different had they done the steps just a little bit different order, or added that cultipacking rolling step in there ahead of time.
Gotcha. Yeah, this makes sense, though. It buries seed too much and just won't allow seed growth. Not strong enough to break through.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the other big things that I want to touch on real quick is that every time you turn the soil, whether you disc it, rototill it, you work it up with a rake, and you get that ground, turn it with a shovel, whatever, walk behind a rototiller. Every time you turn the soil, you're turning up years and years of grass and weed seedlings. They've been laying there dormant, just like if you bury your food plot seed too deep. Those seeds have been laying there, unable to germinate. But when you turn that soil over, you're exposing them to the air and to the sunlight, and you get germination. And so time and time again, I see people say, well, I went through all the steps, I did everything I was supposed to do, I burned it down, well, everything that was growing. Well, Mother Nature produces different food or germinates different seeds at different times of the year to produce food for wildlife and to continue to replenish that vegetation. And so at different intervals throughout the year, those seeds that you turn up, whether they're grass or some type of broadleaf or a variety of different plants, are going to germinate at different times of the year. And so when people are starting a new food plot, what I tell them is that we do an 80-20 mix. So we do 20 to 30% perennials and 70 to 80% annuals. And even though we're putting perennial plots that could last 5, 6, 7 years, the reality is that we're going to end up replanting them in that first couple seasons, because it's going to take you a couple seasons of tilling it at exactly the same length, depth each time to continue to cycle those grass and weed seasons that have been laying there for, maybe hundreds of years. And what I encourage folks to do is to make sure they till at the same depth, plant spring and summer food plots as much as you can. Start with that annual mix and then migrate into a perennial. Plant your perennials in the fall will help to eliminate some of that stress or that pressure. But I plant my perennials, and I'll put clovers, our KFP Resurrection Clover and our chicory. I'll plant those in with my deep woods or with my Carnage brassicas in the fall, knowing that they're not going to take off real big and strong as far as growth up out of the ground, because they'll be competing with some of the others, but they will become established in the ground. And after the winter passes, that clover and that chicory will have established a good root structure underground, and they will come back and be one of the first things to green up in the spring, and it'll be a perennial food plot established. And they can get a jump start on the grass and weed before they get established later in the spring. What my point of that is that it's difficult to start clovers and chicories and alfalfa and other perennials right out of the gate and not expect to have grass and weed infiltration. You're going to have to address that. And it can cost you $200 to $300 potentially per acre to try to save your food plot but get rid of the grass and weeds. So it's usually cheaper just to cycle it through, start with some annual, add some perennials in the fall, gives you greater success next spring, knowing that maybe next fall you're going to have to disc it all up, spray it down, kill off the grass and weeds, and do it again for a couple seasons until you can get ahead of those grass and weed seedlings.
Gotcha.
And eradicate them.
Right on. What's our next product?
The next product is the Resurrection Clover and our KFP Chicory. Our Resurrection Clover is made up of 6 clovers. They're all 90% germ clover. It's a mix of white and red. We have some KFP varieties in there that are extremely palatable, very thin leaves, stems, as well as the branches of the plant are edible to whitetails. They produce a lot of tonnage per acre. It's made up of a white ladino clover, some Perseum, and some other high-quality, very palatable varieties for whitetail. And then our KFP Chicory is a unique variety of chicory. Its paper-thin leaves with zero waxy coating allow the metabolization by a whitetail. That's a 44% protein, highly palatable food source for whitetail, where our clovers are 35 to 37%, again, almost 3 to 4 times as high as what Mother Nature is providing. Very critical. All very high germination. What that germination means is that 90% of that particular seed variety, when planted correctly, is going to turn into a plant. And one of the things we really pride ourselves on at KFP is we give 50% more clover of every one of those varieties. We give 50% more than anybody in the industry. And the reason we do that is clovers now, I joke and say all my clover growers drank the Kool-Aid 3 years ago, but they all gave into this coating. And coating is kind of a newer thing in the last 5-6 years, maybe 7 years. To really hit the industry, and a lot of seeds are coated, and there's reasons for that, or there's different speculation of why you would do coated seed. And I've been an anti-coating guy for 22 of my 26 years. I want good, high-quality seed, not coated. But my clover growers also drank the Kool-Aid, and they all gave into the coating. So what it comes down to is we wanted to make up for that coating, because when you buy seed, you buy it by the pound. And when you buy 4 pounds of clover and it's coated with 40, 50, 60% coating, well, your seed count is reduced by that. So we have roughly 25% coating on our clover, but yet we give 50% more seed in the bag to more than make up for that. On our chicory, it's the same thing. We give extra weight, extra seed count in our bag there to make up for the little bit of coating. We only have like 17% coating on that. The next product is the Carnage brassicas. Now, this is a powerhouse product as far as carbohydrates. It's very carb heavy, which is very critical energy for your deer at that prime time of the hunting season, when the pre-rut, rut, and post-rut, followed by the hard winters in the north. You really can't beat the Carnage brassicas for daily energy to continue to build their fat reserves up and give them what they need on a daily basis. That is made up of the killer food plot turnips, purple top turnip, rape, our KFP radishes, and then we use kale as our protein source, which is kale is a great food for you and I as a human, but it's a superfood for whitetails in that post-rut time frame to help build their bodies back. So all of those particular varieties are, again, a lettuce variety brassica, very, very palatable. Our next product is our Deep Woods, which I spoke about earlier, is our answer to throw and grow. Again, has an annual rye, high-quality rye, a winter wheat, our KFP radishes, our rape, and we use crimson clover as the protein in that mix. Cool thing about deep woods is it grows from full sun all the way down to 3 hours of sunlight. So it can be in some of those more secluded areas or those kind of tucked away spots where we're trying to capture those bucks that are slinking through and give them a little snack to stop them and have the opportunity to harvest them. Very, very highly palatable, and that food source is available from the time you plant it, either in the fall all the way to spring, or if you plant it in the spring is a great cover crop type food plot that provides good nutrition, rebound, and then you can turkey hunt over that as well. Our next product is our cold play mix. And our cold play is a brand new product for killer food plots. That is made up of 3 different clovers as well as alfalfa, the climbing vining winter pea, and the buckwheat. And that product is geared towards turkey hunters, but is also a great whitetail mix as well. The reason that it does so well for turkeys is turkeys love the alfalfa and the 3 clovers that are in that particular blend. It also attracts a lot of healthy bugging activity, so a lot of climbing, flying, crawling type worms and caterpillars and different types of bugs are attracted to that. Plus, turkeys, just like whitetails, love buckwheat, so they are in that quite often. Our final product is our killer food plot lethal winter oats. Our winter oats is a great product. It can be grown from full sun all the way to indirect sunlight. So we say that takes over where our deep wood stops as far as sunlight. We can plant that in logging roads or areas where we're only getting indirect sun. You always need some sunlight. You're not going to plant it in the middle of the dark woods and have great success. But as long as you get some indirect sunlight, your lethal winter oats is going to do well. The oats will grow in a variety of different soil types, just like the deep woods. It'll grow in sand, it'll grow in loam, it'll grow in clay, more of a muck-type soil close to a swamp edge. Very, very versatile. It grows in about 2.5 weeks. You throw it out and you want to work that one into the ground, like it's considered a bigger seed on the lethal winter oats. So if you work it in with a rake, you can work it in with a harrow after you've disked it up or worked it up. But it's a pretty versatile plant. It develops and becomes edible in about 2.5 weeks. It grows to a point where the deer will start to consume it, and it will continue to grow. Our lethal winter oats is very, very winter hardy. It lasts through multiple frosts, 5, 6 frosts, even snow, where a lot of winter oats die at the first sign of frost.
Very interesting, Nick. That's a whole lot of seed. That's a whole lot of information. Wow. I'm just sitting back absorbing it all.
Yeah, I know it can be a little overwhelming, and for somebody that's brand new, their head will be spinning. But what I can assure folks is that, you know, if they come to Killer Food Plots and they need to get some information, they need some help, we're here to do that. Myself and my staff are very, very informative and can help them answer those simple questions to the tough questions. And it's very important to me as the owner of Killer Food Plots that each one of our seed products is made to meet a specific need for whitetail deer at critical times of the year. It's not made to replace Mother Nature. I mentioned this earlier, but it's made to build upon her proteins and her carbohydrates. In my 10-plus years, almost 11 years of raising whitetail in a high fence, working with my biologists and my veterinarians, and really keying in on what is important and what seed varieties, plant varieties, can whitetails get the maximum nutrition from, and that's what we have in our Killer Food Plot blends.
Gotcha.
There's no fillers, there's no junk, there's no, stuff that doesn't benefit them. It's very targeted, and that's what makes a Killer Food Plot, and that's, our tagline is you reap what you sow, and we really believe that we need to provide the highest quality, highest nutrition, and highest palatability that can be sought and provided to our whitetail.
Very, very interesting, Nick. That was a great rundown. So can I grow a food plot anywhere? I mean, we talked a lot about growing them. What about location, and where should we put them and where should we not put them?
Well, one of the things that I always encourage when we do a property consultation, one of the things that's at the very top of the list is entry-exit strategy. So when you're going to place a food plot, it's no different. How am I going to get from my truck or my house or my cabin to the tree I want to hunt? Well, if I put the food plot right in the middle between me and the tree or me and my blind, I'm probably going to be spooking deer out in the mornings when it's dark, and I'm probably going to be late for dinner trying to wait to shoo those deer off the food plot or try to find a way to sneak around it to get back to the house or in my truck. So we tell people you got to really think about the placement of your food plot in relationship for the entry-exit strategy. We also want to place our food plot close to cover, especially for later season plots. We don't want our whitetails moving more than 50 to 75 yards from bedding areas or cover areas that they have cover to those late season high energy food sources. We want to preserve their fat content on their body. We don't want them burning that energy to try to travel long distances to the food plot. So that's something to consider.
Okay.
We also want to talk about other cover or other pressure. So if we have a neighbor on the other side of the fence, we want to make sure we're putting our food plot in a place that benefits us, but that doesn't necessarily draw the deer or allow the neighbor to cut us off on our deer movement. That's one of the big things that we see in a lot of properties is, as the placement of that food plot becomes critical in trying to manage your deer. Maybe your neighbor doesn't cooperate or doesn't agree with the same management thing you have, so that's something to consider.
Okay.
One of the other factors for a food plot placement is the soil type and the amount of sunlight you have. What type of soil is in one area of your particular piece of property or another. And then what that will directly affect is your checkbook and how much do you have to amend that particular piece of soil or how much work has to go into getting it ready to plant.
Okay, got it. And I was curious about that question about where can we grow these things because, I'm thinking about these dense canopy pine groves where there's lots of pine cones on and pine needles, and I assume the soil is pretty acidic. Doesn't seem like a great place to grow a food plot if I'm just an innocent bystander, but is that even a possibility, or is that just something you just cross off the list right away?
No, it's absolutely possible, but what's limiting is, in a lot of cases, is sometimes the sunlight is limited in those areas. So
right. Exactly.
You may have to eliminate a few rows of jack pines or spruces or whatever type of variety that are in there to give yourself some east-west or north-south sunlight to get in there.
Okay.
The soil pH that you mentioned is going to probably be really acidic.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so you probably have to change that. So really, if you don't necessarily need like a field, like you don't have to go make a field, but you need sunlight. So you could grow it in and amongst like hardwood trees that might have been thinned out, that have proper soil and do all the right testing. But a super thick canopy that doesn't allow sunlight in is not a great place. But a place that does have some sunlight would probably not be a bad idea. And it sounds like the more open you are, like you'd think of any garden spot, that would be probably a really good place. But it sounds like you can make it work in other spots where it's not all just wide open.
Yeah, that's correct. So, we talked about the different varieties of killer food plots seeds. So when you talk about the Border Patrol, that is going to need full direct sunlight. You're going to need at least 8 to 10 hours of spring-summer sunlight to grow that to its full capability of 8 to 10 foot. Where the climatized, that can grow in full sun down to 6 hours of sunlight, of direct sunlight throughout the spring, summer. And then clover, the resurrection clover and chicory. Clover, what you want to do is try to avoid planting clover in an area where it gets hot afternoon sun, that late sun in the middle of the summer, especially late July and August, scorching hot. So clover can take a little bit more of a shady spot. It likes a little bit more moist soil. And if you don't have moist or high quality soil, planting it in a little more of a shaded environment would actually benefit it. Whereas chicory can handle full, direct, hot sun, but it puts down a 14 to 16 inch taproot about the size of your pinky. So it's a fairly decent sized taproot, and it's a very drought tolerant type plant. Your brassicas, your turnips, your radishes, your rape, those type of brassica seed varieties, they can usually handle full sun, but if you plant them in the spring and summer to get them big and large and get a lot of tonnage per acre, you need to plant those in an area where they also don't get late afternoon sun so they don't burn up the tops of those thin rape and turnip green. You want to make sure that those are getting a good morning and maybe till early afternoon, but not that late afternoon, hot, late summer type sun. When you plant them in August, you're getting good ground temperature, and they're young and tender and they grow very rapidly, we have less problems with that hot sun type or exposure to that hot sun. Really helps the new young plant grow and thrive and take right off. But as the plant gets older, larger, and it requires more moisture by planting it in the spring, you get a little bit of that reverse effect. So,
Very interesting. Dusty, you have any other questions for Nick?
Well, I think Nick pretty much covered everything that it takes to put into a great quality food plot to keep them big, mature bucks on your farm.
I agree. Nick, do you have a good deer story to tell us?
Well, I mentioned I used to raise whitetails for several years, and I bottle fed and raised one of my big, mature Saskatchewan bloodline whitetails, and her name was Sweet Pea, and she was my baby, and she got to be 6 years old, and she became the alpha doe. And there's all of us in this world, we all kind of have our own personality, and some of us are super nice, all the way to people that are a little grumpy. Well, she became the grumpy Gus, and she was not real tolerant of other deer, chasing them, biting them, running them off, except for her immediate young. And even though we were the dominant creature in the enclosure when we were younger, we didn't take much grief from our deer and kind of showed them who was in charge. Sweet Pea decided that she was going to show me that she had grown much like a teenager, kind of sprouting their wings and having their own way. She was my teenager, and I can remember I was in there filling her water bucket inside on the concrete in front of the pole barn, and I had closed this little door kennel, or like a dog kennel run gate that we had separating the main enclosure where she was located from the feeding area, but I didn't fully latch it. And I remember letting up on the sprayer hose, the sprayer on the hose. I was filling the water bucket, and I heard click, click on the concrete, and I turned around, and this 200-pound Saskatchewan whitetail was standing over the top of me, getting ready to come down and kick on me. And I remember taking the grain bucket and whacking her legs. Well, of course, she couldn't get traction on the cement, so she went down, and she went back up again. And I thought, oh my gosh. Afterwards, I thought, well, I should have sprayed her with a hose. But at that time, the first thought that came into my head is, what does your football coach say when you play on the line? Low man wins.
Right.
I lowered my shoulder and hit her as hard as I could, and it was the best tackle I've ever made any time of my life. And I used to be a nose guard, so in high school, but it was something else. Well, from that point forward, my little baby had a serious attitude, and whenever I would come out of the house or I'd pull in the driveway, she'd start pacing the fence, and she just was not having anything to do with me being near her or without being confrontational. So we talked to another one of our breeder friends, and he told us, hey, get apples and throw apples, because our dominant deer will go out there and try to get those apples and keep them from the other deer because they're very dominant about food.
Yeah.
Well, ours was very much obstinate. She would run and get the apple and bring it back and look at you like, now what? So we'd start whipping apples out or whatever, and my cousin would just crack up, and she'd run out and get them, and eventually the other deer got involved. And well, that particular year, we had him pretty trained to come and get the apples, and I could get her away to do what we needed to do in the enclosure and then get the heck out of there without too many problems. Well, he went away, and sure enough, she and I had a little bat where I had just a 5-gallon Homer bucket in my hand, and she had come through an area where the fence had been broken down, and my cousin didn't fix it. He just leaned a piece of that fencing up there. Well, leaned up creates a void at the bottom, and the grass was about 5 foot tall in that area of that enclosure where all of our button bucks were at. And she wasn't even supposed to be in that enclosure. I'm way in the back of the edge of the pole barn, dumping the grain in the buckets, and all of a sudden I hear this underneath my armpit, and I look, and it's Sweet Pea. And I'm thinking, oh man, I'm in a 3-sided enclosure, and what am I going to do? And so I started petting her, and I started back and try to get mid-body on her, so I had some opportunity to react, and she seemed fine, and she sniffed everything, and her ears were still up, perky, and not laid back. And so I started walking back towards that area where we had our initial fight there, or battle, and she was fine all the way to right outside that door, sloppy, wet, muddy area. And at that point, she'd been leaning on me. She likes me to scratch behind her left ear like your black lab. She just loves that. She was fine all the way there. She was looking out the fence like she saw something and kind of acting curious. When she got me to that mud, just before I walked through that gate where we had our first battle and I had tackled her and knocked her down, she spun around and unleashed the Marvin Hagler speed punch on me and just laid my head open, knocked me to the ground, and all I had was a 5-gallon Homer bucket from Home Depot to defend myself. And I tell you what, man, she knocked the daylights out of me pretty good. I had 16 staples in my head. But talk about not being able to live it down at deer camp for at least 5 years from my buddies about how some big doe beat the daylights out of me.
Oh, yeah.
And they were always teasing me every time, are you sure you want to go out in the dark? There's some big does out there, you know. They're always teasing me about it. Oh, the big bad doe that lives in the woods. But, yeah, it was quite an experience and something that, you know, you really take for granted the power those animals have. And at 8.5 years old, she was 280 pounds. So she was a big doe. And I'm not a huge guy, so she definitely had 100 pounds on me easy. So, but yeah, that's my deer story. It's my memorable deer story from raising my deer. And every once in a while, I can still feel those scars on my head and remember it. But I love my deer. Absolutely love raising deer. I love changing and improving their habitat, making conditions better for them. It's really what drives me. You know, that's my passion. That's absolutely my passion. I'm an engineer by trade. All day, I'm a program engineer. Used to be a manufacturing engineer in the automotive industry. But whitetails and habitat are my passion. So
that's the best non-deer killing deer story we've ever had on this show. That's fantastic.
Well,
that's really
pretty
funny.
Crazy stuff.
That's awesome. I've got 10 rapid fire questions for you, Nick.
All right.
What's your number one hunting tip of all time?
My number one hunting tip of all time is safety, safety, safety. No deer is worth your life. Use your harness. Use a lifeline to climb your tree. That's my number one advice.
Got it. All right. What's the one thing you have to have in the woods with you when you're hunting at all times?
Rangefinder.
Got it.
I've missed my share of deer misjudging the distance.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So have I. That's a good one. What's your biggest pet peeve?
The guy that wanders in an hour after he should have been sitting in the stand and gets bored and wanders around through the woods when there's a lot of other people that showed up plenty of hours and minutes before he did and screwing up somebody's hunt.
Yep, that's a good one. All right. How old are you today, Nick?
I am 44 years old.
44. What would you tell the 22-year-old Nick Percy, knowing what you know today about life and everything?
Balance is everything in life.
That's a good answer.
Balance is everything in life.
That's a real good answer. All right, you meet a stranger at a hunting convention, and you strike up a conversation. They ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
I developed whitetail habitat.
Very good. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
The same thing I have every single morning. I had a fruit parfait, I had a breakfast burrito, and 2 large unsweetened iced teas with light ice from McDonald's.
That's excellent. Very nice. Let's see. You can have a billboard, and it says it's totally blank slate. You can have anything you want on it. What do you put on the billboard?
What do I put on this billboard? Your faith is everything.
I like it. All right. Well, if I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
One of my first bosses, and the reason why is because he was a people person. He was somebody who cared more about the people that worked for him, making sure that he was a good teacher, he was patient, he was intentional, and every single one of us would have thrown ourselves in front of an oncoming bus to save that man's life, and he invested everything he had into each one of us.
Sounds like a heck of a guy.
Yeah, he was.
That's good.
Good example.
Oh, what's a day in the life of Nick Percy look like?
Chaotic.
Right.
I get up at 6:30, 5:30 every morning. 6:30, get things around, get out the door, go to work. In between that, I get 40 to 45 phone calls buzzing through my cell phone, asking food plot questions and habitat questions. Try to answer those when and where I can throughout the day or lunch. Get out of that, answer as many as I can on the way home. Pick my daughter up, whisk her home, work hard. She's in 7th grade. Work on getting dinner ready, getting her homework done, play some games, probably answer more phone calls, stay up till 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, working on quotes and answering emails and getting prepared for the next day, go to bed for a few hours, get back up and do it again.
Wow. All right. This sounds like a busy day, that's for sure. All right.
I work 150 hours a day or 150 hours a week on busy weeks when we start planning. It's insane. I knew my ADHD would pay off someday.
That's a good point. All right. So when deer season rolls around, what's a deer hunting day in the life look like? Is it any different than your regular day in the life?
Oh, it is. It's where Nick Percy and the rest of the crew at Killer Food Plots gets to take a deep breath. We get to go regain our sanity in the tree stand, hanging out with each other, hanging out with the many friends and what we consider our KFP family members. We hunt with a lot of our customers and a lot of our clients and whether it be here in our own home state or we travel to hunt. That's the beauty of the business we have, is it's, we don't have to be we're not fixing a bow or fixing something that somebody needs or selling them something they need during hunting season. And we're able to actually sit back and watch the success of our customers unfold and, shooting that buck or doe of a lifetime and getting out there with their family and friends and making memories.
Gotcha. That's awesome. All right. Any final questions for Nick, Dusty?
No, I think Nick covered the spectrum of everything, including breakfast. That's one heck of a breakfast, Nick.
Dude, I love that breakfast. That's fantastic. That's the biggest breakfast answer we've had so far. Like, nobody eats that much at breakfast. That's awesome. All right. And Nick, where can we find more information about you and your company and your products if we wanted to reach out?
Well, you can go to killerfoodplots.com. You can check us out on Facebook, Killer Food Plots, and our Instagram is at Killer Food Plots. We're on Twitter as well, but there's a ton of pictures, a lot of success and different stories out there, and a lot of things where you're going to see us and see our team, and most importantly, that's where our KFP family, those are our customers, but they're our family, and that's where we want and encourage people to share their pictures, share them putting their food plots in with their buddies or their kids or their wife, and really getting out there and enjoying putting their food plots in Mother Nature.
Awesome. Right on. Nick, this has been fantastic. It's been an honor, and you're full of knowledge. And thank you so much for sharing that with us and all of our contingent and listeners and diehard deer hunting fans trying to get something going in their woods with their food plots. It's been absolutely priceless.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's always a joy to talk with you, and I look forward to hearing from some folks that maybe need some help or share their stories with me. So
awesome, man. Well, that was a full education in a nutshell.
Oh, man, it's right on my alley, Jay. That's probably one of my most favorite podcasts we do, is where we talk about food plots and what it takes to be a stewardess of the soil and grow big, mature bucks. It's something that really sparks my interest. It's something that I've been around for a real long time. And, Nick's definitely educated enough to be able to break a lot of things down and help somebody that's just new to working soils and getting into food plotting. This podcast here will take your hunts to the next level. There's no doubt about it.
No doubt about it. So do you have I know we just talked about a lot of tips on this show. Do you have an additional Chubby Tines tip of the week, Dusty?
Yeah, I do, The
Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
Don't be scared to ask the farmer if you can buy an acre or two of standing corn. If you're somebody that's not, you fear that you'd not have the skills or the education to build a food plot, and you got a farmer that's farming in the field right next to the wood lines where you're hunting, find out who farms it. The landowner sometimes, rents out their farm. Find who's the farmer, and then go to the farmer and say, hey, I'm big time into deer hunting, but I'm not the best at, and maybe you don't have the financial capabilities to buy all the equipment to plant a food plot. Let's go talk to the farmer and say, hey, can I buy the yield off of 2 acres over in this one particular corner? If you pay him fair market price and he tells you a fair yield, if you got corn out and he says it's making 160 bushel of the acre and gives you a market price, and you say, okay, take the 160 times the market price, and that's what the end result is, you can buy that corn from him. I'll guarantee you that he'll work with you. That's something that a lot of people overlook. If you just go talk to the farmer, tell him you'd like to have 2 acres of soybeans or corn, pay him the market price, he's more than likely going to leave that corn stand for you so you can hunt over it.
That's a great tip. I wouldn't have thought that, but you never cease to amaze me. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I just tried to help out others to be more successful in the whitetail woods, Jay. That's all. Everybody says, man, where do you come up with all these tips? Well, it's just I've been there, and I wouldn't say I've done that, but it's just I try to think beyond what's right in front of my face. And, if you see the farmer working ground right now, go ask him. Say, hey, get the bug in his head that you're interested in 2 acres over in the corner by your woods that you're hunting. And just tell him that you'd be more than happy to pay him for it. If you think you might not have the money in the fall time, can I get on a payment program? Let me give you $100 a month here for the next few weeks or the next few months.
Right.
I'm sure he'd work something out with you. There's no doubt about it. As me being a farmer, I'd be more than happy to help a hunter out.
That's awesome. That's a great idea. I'm gonna try that on a spot. Very, very nice. So, hey, I want to say thanks to Nick Percy for joining us on the Big Buck Podcast and telling us everything he knows about food plots. And thanks again to Morse's Sporting Goods for supporting our efforts here. Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here with me on the microphone?
Facebook.com/Chubby Times Outdoors. It's slow right now, but hey, it's the middle of summer and everybody's out in the pool and hanging out with their families and barbecuing and grilling, and it's completely understandable. Then you can look me up on Instagram @ChasingAntler or shoot me an email right here at dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not missing turkeys?
If you'd like to give me a call, or actually, if you'd like to contact me, the best place to try that is to shoot me an email, and that's jay@bigbuckregistry.com. If you'd like to visit our Facebook page, it's facebook.com/bigbuckregistry, and it's a universal theme. So you go to Twitter, it's Big Buck Registry, Instagram, Big Buck Registry. Across the board, it's always Big Buck Registry. We have a blog, bigbuckregistry.com, where you can actually listen to and read all of the bullet points and all the show notes of every show we've ever done right there, bigbuckregistry.com. The show notes are also available in the Apple Podcast app, and you can read and listen to all the topics that we discuss in each and every show. And by the way, if you are an Apple user, if you would, please do a search for the Big Buck Registry and leave us a review. We are in need of some more reviews, actually. It's been a while since we got one, but we could always use a 5-star if you love the show. And please subscribe if you have an iPhone. Also, if you're on the Android device, you can now listen to us on Google Play. And that is bigbuckregistry.com/Google Play. And you can get all the shows right there on your Android device. It's not available on the Google Play app on the iPhone yet. I know this is confusing, but basically just stick to your podcast app or to our app to listen to our show on any Apple device. And then you can just Google Big Buck Registry for any Android or Google device or on Google Play. So hopefully that sorts that out. So I think that's basically it. If you'd like to donate to the show, we could always use an additional hand, and you can pledge as a patron to the show, bigbuckregistry.com/pledge, and all the information that you need is right there. And we actually have giveaways. So at different levels, we will actually send you some stuff that has the brand of the Big Buck Registry right on it. I think that is a wrap, Dusty. I think those are all the places we're hanging out. And we're not here.
A lot of big buck, Jay.
A whole lot of big buck, brother. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.